It started last winter, mid-December. My cousin Nate had this idea to spend a weekend at his family's old hunting cabin near Lake Superior. The place had been abandoned for years, built by his dad back in the late 82nds, and he called it a digital detox. No internet, no real cell service, just a wood stove, a few beers, and a couple quiet days in the woods. I was hesitant because the timing sucked. Roads were icy, snowstorms every few days, but Nate wouldn't shut up about it. Said he needed to clear his head after his breakup, and that I owed him one for missing his birthday. So I said, screw it. The drive up was worse than either of us expected. The last few miles were all winding forest road, barely plowed, no cell service. Snow was falling in thick sheets, and the trees looked like black walls on both sides. Every now and then we'd see a deer dart through the headlights and vanish into the dark, and both of us would flinch. By the time we got to the cabin, it was almost 9 p.m. The place was buried halfway up the porch in snow. No footprints, no tire tracks, just untouched white. Inside smelled like damp wood and animal piss. The first thing we noticed was the cold, not regular cold. It felt wrong somehow, heavier, like it didn't belong inside. We got the generator going. Thank God it still worked, and the little place started to warm up. Nate cracked a beer, joked about how we were real mountain men now. We played a few hands of cards, made some soup on the propane stove, and eventually passed out on the fold-out couch. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The generator had stopped. Everything was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Dead quiet. Like the air itself had stopped moving. I remember sitting up and instantly getting this feeling that something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. My body just knew. When I went outside to restart the generator, my flashlight caught something in the snow. A trail of prints circling the cabin, barefoot, human-shaped but off somehow. The toes were longer, the stride uneven, like whoever made them had been dragging one leg. They went all the way around the cabin and disappeared into the woods. I woke Nate up. He stumbled outside with me, half asleep, swearing I was overreacting until he saw them himself. He crouched down to look closer, and I swear I saw his breath catch when he realized how deep they went. Like whoever made them wait a lot. We locked the doors, piled some firewood in front of the entrance, and tried to pretend it was fine. We barely slept. The next morning the snow had stopped, but the air felt heavier. There was this strange smell, not quite rot, not quite metal, but sharp enough to burn in your nose. We ate a quick breakfast and decided to leave early. But when we went outside, the truck wouldn't start. The battery wasn't just dead, it was gone, like it had been pulled out cleanly. The weirdest part? The hood wasn't even damaged. The latch was still locked, like something had just lifted it open. There were drag marks in the snow leading off toward the trees. He grabbed a hatchet from the shed and said he was going to follow the tracks, just a little way. I told him not to, that we should stay put until someone found us. But he was stubborn like that. He didn't come back. I waited for maybe 20 minutes before I went after him. There were new prints now, his mixed with the others. I followed them about 20 yards before the trees got thicker and the light dimmed. Then I noticed the smell again. Stronger this time. Something was hanging from a branch ahead, part of Nate's flannel sleeve, torn clean off. And below it, the snow was soaked dark. At least, it looked like blood. Later, when the snow melted and refroze, it was gone. Maybe that's why the search team didn't find any sign of it, but in that moment, it was enough to make me freeze in place. That's when I heard him. Or at least, I thought it was him. He said my name, soft at first, then louder. It sounded like it was coming from deeper in the woods, but the echo didn't sound right. It was like the voice was inside my head instead of around me. Nate had shouted my name earlier when he left, so at first I thought maybe he was still close. I called back, but there was only silence. Then I saw it. It was standing between two trees, hunched but still taller than any person should be. Its skin was stretched tight, grayish, and thin enough to show ribs. The head looked human at first, but the jaw was too long, like it had been broken and never healed. When it opened its mouth, I could see black around its gums, and something wet and red dripping from the corners. It stepped forward, and the sound it made wasn't footsteps. It was more like cracking branches inside the snow. I don't remember running, but I must have. I just remember the feeling of my lungs tearing apart in the cold air, and the moment I saw the road, a narrow stretch of white cutting through the trees. I didn't stop until I hit pavement, maybe 2 miles away. When I finally got to a gas station, I called the sheriff's office. They told me the roads were blocked by fallen trees, and they couldn't get a plow up there until the storm cleared. They sent a team 2 days later, once it was finally passable. They found the cabin, they found the truck, they found Nate's phone, frozen and half buried about a mile from the property. But no Nate, no blood trail, nothing else. They said maybe a bear got him. I didn't argue. That was 8 months ago. I've moved 3 times since then. Different cities, different apartments. I don't tell people why. I don't even tell my family the full story. They think I'm still dealing with trauma and making things up in my head. Maybe they're right. But sometimes I wonder if it followed my scent, or if I brought something back from that place without realizing it. 2 nights ago, I woke up around 3:47 a.m. Someone was whispering my name from the hallway. I live alone. When I finally got the courage to look, the whispering stopped. But right under my bedroom window, on the patch of frozen mud, there were footprints, barefoot, human-shaped, and just slightly too long, like the same ones from that night in the snow, perfectly preserved, like whatever made them hadn't walked here. It had just appeared. Winter brings things to the world that people don't really understand, unless they've experienced it themselves. The cold isn't the worst part. It's the way winter compresses everything, the land, the sky, the silence, until you feel like you're trapped inside a pressure cooker with whatever else is out there, whatever else has managed to survive the cold. This happened when I was working as a contract worker for a geological survey company. They sent small teams to remote monitoring stations in the off-season, and that's how I ended up snowmobiling 40 miles into the Montana wilderness with 2 guys I barely knew, Mark and Ben. Our mission was simple on paper: 2 weeks at an unmarked maintenance outpost. Check the seismic monitoring equipment, keep the solar array running, and clear enough snow so the company could pretend the place was still up and running in mid-January. The station wasn't actually supposed to be operational until May, but the company liked making money, and the government would pay extra if the station could operate through the winter. The outpost itself was a single metal bunker, painted a sickly institutional green, sitting in a small, flat clearing surrounded by endless pines. No one designed it to be comfortable, just durable, just survivable. It was the coldest, quietest place I've ever been. Mark, the team leader, was in his late 40s. The kind of man who believed nothing in the world couldn't be fixed with a wrench and a cigarette. If he didn't understand something, he dismissed it. He was the skeptic. Ben was 22, jittery, constantly checking shadows, reacting to every sound like it might kill him. He was the overreactor. Me? I just wanted to get paid and get out. The first week was uneventful, mind-numbing routine. We restored backup power, cleared drifts away from the perimeter, and ran diagnostics on the equipment. The bunker was stocked with canned food, heating oil, and a mess of scratchy government-issue blankets. We even had a satellite radio, though it mostly spat static. It was on the 8th day that things started to go wrong. The weather forecast called for light snowfall. What we got was a whiteout so heavy it erased the outside world. Snow hammered the bunker for 3 straight days, screaming across the metal walls so violently it felt like the building was being sandblasted. We couldn't leave. Not to check the array, not to use the latrine, not even to step outside for a breath of fresh air. We were sealed inside, like specimens in a steel jar. It was during that storm that the small things started. The first happened around 10 p.m. on the second night. Mark and I were playing cards at the small fold-out table. Ben was on the top bunk pretending to read, though he hadn't turned a page in over 20 minutes. Then we heard it, a heavy metallic clunk. It came from the short corridor between the main room and the front door. Not the walls, not the ceiling inside the bunker. Mark froze, cards in hand. What was that? It came from the hall, I said. He took a flashlight and disappeared around the corner. A moment later he came back, holding a red fire extinguisher. Fell off the mount, he said. Wind vibration. The explanation fit, sort of. The storm was shaking the entire structure. Still, there was a strange tightness in Mark's voice. He set the extinguisher beside the door, firmly on the floor. But 20 minutes later, another sound came. Not a clunk this time. A scraping. A dry, deliberate, metallic drag across the outer wall near the ceiling. Ben sat up instantly. That's too big to be a mouse. Mice in the ventilation, Mark snapped. Happens all the time. Oh, but the scraping wasn't small, and it wasn't frantic like an animal. It was slow, purposeful, like someone running a tool across the metal, siding, searching for weak points. Mark marched to the wall and banged his fist twice. The sound stopped immediately. None of us went back to sleep easily. When the storm finally ended the next morning, the world outside had transformed. Snowdrifts 5-6 feet high. Quiet. Untouched. The kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound unnatural. Our first job was digging out the door. It took nearly an hour. Ben watched from inside, pale and anxious, while Mark and I dug. I was clearing snow near the left side of the entrance when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A line in the snow, perfectly straight, thin, maybe an inch wide, 20 feet long, running parallel to the bunker wall. Too perfect to be natural. Not a shovel mark, not a sled, not a fallen branch. It looked deliberate. "Mark," I said, "come look at this." He walked over, followed the line with his eyes, then looked toward the tree line. "Wind shear," he said instantly, or a piece of roof metal dragged during the storm, but it hadn't snowed since the storm ended. Whatever made the line had done it afterward. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I followed the line to where it ended, at the corner of the bunker. The snow was deeper here, piled high against the wall. I pushed aside a layer with my boot, and something dark peeked out from beneath. A snapped piece of thick, plastic-coated wire, maybe 3 feet long. The type used in the seismic junction boxes. Both ends were broken clean, not torn, snapped. I picked it up and felt my chest tighten. This wasn't wind. This wasn't old debris. Something had torn this cable free recently. "Mark," I called, "this is sensor wire, and it's freshly snapped." He looked at it for maybe half a second. "Old," he said, tossing it aside. "Probably got buried last season and blown loose. Don't start imagining things." But he didn't examine it, didn't look at the break, didn't ask where I found it. Back inside the bunker, the air felt different, heavier. Like whatever was outside had followed us in, not physically, but in presence. Ben was watching me, wide-eyed, like he could tell something was wrong. Mark sat at the radio, tapping the dead receiver with a strange, stubborn determination. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop replaying the contradictions in my head. The scraping on the wall, the perfect line in the snow, the freshly snapped wire, and above everything else, Mark's reaction to all of it. Immediate dismissal, absolute denial, and a kind of hostility that didn't fit the situation. It wasn't just that he didn't believe me. It was that he refused to even consider the possibility. That night, the tension was suffocating. The three of us existed in silence, pretending to read, pretending to sleep, pretending to be normal. But Mark never stopped watching us. Around midnight, I finally spoke. "Mark," I said quietly, "we should check the sensor array before the next storm hits." "It's working fine," he said without looking up. "The wire was snapped," I insisted. "The casing might be damaged." He turned his head slowly toward me, his expression flat, almost emotionless. "We'll check it in the morning," he said. "Go to sleep." But I knew waiting wasn't an option. If something or someone was trying to access our equipment, it was better to know now rather than later. The next day, under a pale gray sky, we hiked up to the array. The snow was deep, soaking through my pants as we moved. Mark walked ahead of us, shovels in hand, silent. When we reached the first junction box, I saw immediately that my suspicion had been right. The small metal port where the wire should have fed in was bent outward, warped in a way no animal could have managed. Something had tried to pry it open. I didn't even need to speak, I just pointed. Mark didn't look, didn't acknowledge it, didn't break stride. He walked straight past me to the farthest sensor, half buried in snow near a thick stand of pine trees. And that's where he stopped. I saw it before he could react. A footprint, not an animal's, not ours. A human boot print deep, wide, with an aggressive snow tread, much larger than our sizes. Someone had been standing right where we were standing now. I looked at Mark, expecting shock. Instead, I watched him do the single most unnerving thing I've ever seen. He lifted his shovel, turned his foot, and obliterated the print with a quick, grinding twist. Then he smoothed the snow over it like it had never existed. Bear print, he said calmly. Don't start panicking. He didn't believe that. Not for a second. And the fact that he said it so easily, so quickly, without even glancing at the shape of the print, that was when the real fear set in. The fear of the thing outside had been bad enough. The fear of the man inside was worse. We walked back in silence. Ben kept glancing at me, waiting for some explanation, but I had none. There was only one thing I knew for sure. Mark was hiding something, and whatever he was hiding was connected to whoever was out there. The next 2 days dragged on like a nightmare. Mark kept the key to the door on him at all times. He guarded the radio. He never let Ben or me step outside alone. Ben whispered to me when Mark wasn't looking. "He's acting weird, Samuel," he said one afternoon, wiping moisture from the freezing wall. "He told me the satellite phone battery is dead. It was at 90% yesterday. I saw it. I didn't know how to answer. We had 4 nights left until the snowcat returned to pick us up. 4 nights trapped in a metal box with a man who was either lying to us or protecting someone dangerous. That night, I couldn't sleep, not even for a second. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow felt alive. Around 3 a.m., Mark's snoring stopped abruptly. I froze. 10 seconds of silence. Then, the soft rustle of a blanket. I kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep, as I watched him through half-closed eyes. He dressed quietly in his thermal layers. He put on his boots. He grabbed a black backpack from under his bunk. He didn't take a flashlight. Then he moved to the door, slow, careful steps. He unlocked the first bolt. Ben didn't stir. He unlocked the second. Then he stepped outside and pulled the door gently shut behind him. He didn't lock it. He planned to come back. I waited 10 seconds, then crept to the door's reinforced window, pressing my face to the icy glass. Mark wasn't leaving. He wasn't checking equipment. He was walking in a strange zigzag pattern across the clearing, heading toward the same pine stand where the footprint had been. Under the moonlight, the snow glowed silver. I watched him kneel by a large tree and uncover a small hollow in the snow, a hidden stash. He opened his backpack and pulled out food. 2 large sealed bags packed with non-perishables taken from our supplies. Then, a thick wool blanket military issue. He tucked the supplies into the hollow like he'd done it a dozen times before. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a stiff metal wire, and used it to draw a perfect straight line in the snow. A signal, a marker, a path, right toward the woods. My breath fogged the glass. Mark wasn't sabotaging anything. He wasn't trying to hurt us. He was leaving supplies for someone out there, someone he had been feeding, night after night, long before Ben and I realized we weren't alone, and that someone had already tried to get into the bunker. Mark walked back, locked the door, and went straight to sleep like nothing had happened. I didn't sleep at all. At dawn, the snowcat arrived. Mark smiled like everything was normal. Ben and I kept quiet, too afraid to say a word. As we loaded up to leave, I looked back at the bunker one last time. At the tree line. At the perfect straight line Mark had drawn hours earlier, barely visible under a thin veil of new snow. And far beyond it, just inside the shadows of the pines, I saw movement. Slow, deliberate, watching us leave. Mark never reported anything unusual. He quit a month later. Ben refuses to talk about the outpost at all. And sometimes, in the dead of winter, when the world goes silent and the cold compresses everything, I think about that straight line in the snow, and I wonder if someone is still following it. This happened when I was 26, living in a small, historic town in upstate New York. It was a town that sold its history all dark wood, cobblestone streets, and the kind of heavy, wet snow that clings to everything and muffles the world completely. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a Victorian-era house. The house was owned by an elderly couple who lived on the 1st floor and rented out the upper 2. It was an old place, and in the winter, the draft was constant. The pipes groaned, and the floorboards sighed with every step. My roommate was a woman named Chloe. She was the one who could always talk me out of my anxiety, the skeptic who lived with me. For 2 years, we'd been perfect anchors for each other. The weirdness started with the keys. Specifically, the key to our shared front door. The apartment building had 2 main locks, the main street door, and then our personal apartment door on the 3rd floor. We each had a set of 2 keys, and we rarely used the main street door key, as the owners often left it unlocked for contractors or deliveries. One snowy Tuesday night, Chloe and I got back from work, freezing, and she went to hang her coat on the wall hook. She paused, reaching into her pocket. "Did you borrow my street door key, John?" she asked. "No." "Why?" "It's gone. I distinctly remember putting it in the zipper pocket of my wallet this morning before I left. It's not there." We searched for 10 minutes. Her coat pockets, her bag, the small entryway table. No key. "Must have fallen out in the car," I suggested. "We'll find it tomorrow." Chloe was meticulous. Her entire life was organized into color-coded spreadsheets. The loss of a key, especially one she was certain she had, completely derailed her. "It didn't fall out," she insisted, running her hands through her hair. "I didn't even use that pocket. The last time I saw it, it was clipped inside my wallet pouch. It was a small point, but it lodged itself in my mind." We went on with our night, but the loss of the key had unsettled the house's deep quiet. The next morning, I was alone in the apartment. Chloe had left for an early shift. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I noticed something on the small, square corkboard above the phone charger. It was a corkboard we used for grocery lists, utility notices, and takeout menus. Pushed into the corkboard, right through a utility bill, was a key. Not a key. The key. Chloe's missing street door key. It was unmistakable. It had a small, unique scratch on the brass, like a tiny lightning bolt. I stared at it. It was pinned by a black thumbtack, as casually as a shopping receipt. I felt a cold rush of adrenaline, followed by a dizzying sense of confusion. I pulled the key off the board, holding it in my trembling hand. How could it have gotten there? I was the only person home. Chloe hadn't been in the kitchen this morning. I hadn't gone near the corkboard since last night. If it had been in the apartment, why wasn't it on the entry table? And why would either of us pin a key to a corkboard? I immediately called Chloe, my voice shaking. "I found your key," I said. "Where? Did it drop behind the sofa?" "No. It was pinned to the kitchen corkboard, right through the electric bill." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "John," she said, her voice flat, "I didn't put it there. And you definitely didn't put it there." "I know," I whispered. "So who did?" Chloe immediately fell into her skeptic mode, reaching for a rational explanation. "One of the landlords must have come up to check the radiator or something, saw the key on the floor, and, not knowing whose it was, pinned it up for safekeeping. It's an old couple, John. They're probably forgetful." It was a plausible, calming explanation. I wanted to believe it. But the next night, something else went missing. The first floor of our apartment was dominated by a large, antique fireplace built into the wall. On the mantelpiece, we kept a few decorations, mostly cheap ceramic knickknacks, and a small silver-framed photograph of Chloe and me, taken at a mutual friend's wedding the previous summer. I remember the photo clearly. We were both laughing, standing on a lawn, slightly out of focus. It wasn't a valuable photo, but it was a personal one. When I got home from work on Wednesday, the second night after the key incident, I walked into the living room, threw my coat down, and immediately noticed the gap on the mantel. The silver picture frame was gone. I searched the room immediately. Under the couch, behind the curtain, on the bookshelf, gone. I checked with Chloe when she got home. "Did you move the frame? Maybe to dust?" Chloe looked at the gap, her skepticism finally beginning to crumble. "I didn't touch it, John. I haven't dusted in a week." Now the fear, not the panic, but the cold, creeping fear began. Someone had been in our apartment, twice, once to remove a key and once to return it. And now, they had taken a personal item. But how? The main street door was often unlocked, but our apartment door was never left open. We each had our only keys. We checked the windows. All were frozen shut, the old metal latches securely in place. There was no sign of forced entry, no disturbed snow outside our window. "We need to call the police," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "Someone is entering our apartment." "And what will we tell them?" I asked, my voice edged with defeat. "That someone took a $10 picture frame and pinned a key to a board? They'll think we're crazy. They'll tell us to change the locks, which will take 3 days and cost us a fortune." We decided to keep watch, just like I had done at the cabin. We'd stay up, alternating turns, until we were too exhausted. The psychological weight of the situation, the violation of our private space without any sign of physical violence, was crushing. It felt intimate and terrifying. On Thursday, the third morning, Chloe left for her work training. I woke up, alone, to a cold, overcast day. The whole house felt empty. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and my eyes immediately went to the corkboard. And there it was. Pushed into the corkboard, just below where the key had been, was a square of thick, white cardboard. It was the white backing board from the silver picture frame. On the board, secured with 4 thumbtacks, was the photo itself. The picture of Chloe and me laughing at the wedding. But it was different. It was changed. The image had been completely and meticulously cut in half, from top to bottom. The line was perfectly straight, severing the photograph right between Chloe's body and mine. The left half, the half with Chloe, was pinned up. The right half, the half with me, was gone. The photo was the same. The silver frame, however, remained missing. I stared at the corkboard, paralyzed by a shock so profound it felt like an electric current. The act of cutting the photo, of only leaving one half, was a chilling message, a signal of preference, a selection made. The terror wasn't the loss of an object. It was the realization that the intruder wasn't a thief. They were an observer, a voyeur who was not only entering our private space without our knowledge, but was also making a precise, personal statement about the contents of our relationship. I backed away from the corkboard, my eyes still fixed on the severed photograph. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call the police, to call anyone, to simply run out of the building. But before I could dial, I saw one more detail. Down the hallway, leaning against the radiator in the gloom, was the silver picture frame. It wasn't empty. It was holding a single, new photograph. A photograph that hadn't been there the night before. I forced myself to walk toward it, my whole body resisting the movement. I picked up the frame. The new photo inside was a candid, high-resolution shot. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed, taken last night. The sheet was pulled up to my chin, and my arm was draped over the side of the bed. The image was perfectly clear, the room only dimly lit by the moonlight. But the most horrifying detail was what my arm was draped over. It was the missing half of the original wedding photo, the half with my image, which had been carefully placed on the floor beside my bed, and in the new photo, my hand was resting right on top of it. The intruder hadn't just been in the apartment. They had been in the bedroom, standing over me while I slept, taking a photo, and arranging a chilling tableau that spoke volumes about their access and their intent. I threw the frame down, the glass shattering with a sound that ripped the silence. I was beyond panic, into a state of pure, primal flight. I grabbed my coat and fled the apartment, down the 2 flights of stairs, past the bewildered landlords, and out into the cold, muffling snow. I drove straight to Chloe's training center, pulling her out of her meeting, telling her we were leaving and never coming back. The police report was predictably inconclusive. No one had seen a thing. They chalked it up to a stalker, likely a neighbor, and told us to change the locks and be more vigilant. We never returned to that apartment, leaving all our possessions behind. I never got the key back, but I also never forgot the fear, the paralyzing knowledge that for days, a person had been living around us, entering our secured home without a trace, and not wanting to steal from us, but to collect a part of us, one severed photograph and one stolen frame at a time. And even now, years later, when I wake up in the dark, I still check the floor beside my bed, terrified of what piece of myself might have been placed there while I was dreaming.